In this success story, we are going to share J.K. Rowling biography, a British novelist, best known as the author of the Harry Potter book series. The books were translated into 73 different languages and sold more than 450 million copies. They have become the best-selling book series in history. Also, they have been the basis for a series of films, which is ranked as the second highest grossing film series in history. The distinctive personality traits of J.K. Rowling are perseverance, leadership, effective communication. It's said that real success comes after a string of failures, and that's exactly what happened with Rowling. John, best known as J.K. Rowling, was born on June 31, in 1965, in a small town of Yatty, England. Her pen name, J.K., she incorporated from her grandmother's name, Kathleen. Rowling does not have a middle name. Her father, Peter James Rowling, was an engineer at a legendary British company, and her mother, Anne Rowling, was a half French and half Scottish science technician. They met each other on a train while travelling from King's Cross Station to Arbroath, in Scotland. Both of them were 18 years old. A year later, they got married. Soon, they left the Navy service and relocated to the suburb in Bristol, in the west of England. In 1969, 4 years after the birth of John, the family moved to the nearby village Winterbourne. John was a small, rotund girl, wearing glasses, always being a dreamer. She loved to narrate her incredible fairy tale stories. John wrote her first story when she was 6 years old. It was a fairy tale about a rabbit called Rabbit, who had measles. His friends came to visit him with a giant bee called Miss Bee. John's younger sister Dee was the first listener to her stories. The childhood of the future novelist can't be called difficult. On the contrary, it was a quiet and happy childhood that she spent in surrounding of caring parents, favorite sister and grandmother. John enjoyed studying at St. Michel's Primary School and loved modeling clay pottery, painting and learning of the history of literature. However, her parents always wanted to buy their house in the UK, and when John was 9 years old, they moved to the village Tatchell in the county of Forest of Dean. At this time, John Rowling took a fancy to literature thanks to her mother. Her mother gave all her time to the family, so she wanted to provide a good education to her daughters. Anne read many books to her daughters, and by the years of 5, John could retell every single book almost by heart. John attended St. Michel's Primary School. At school, she realized that her favorite subject was the English language and reading. At the same time, John encountered some problems because of her math teacher, Mrs. Morgan. Hostility. She labeled the left side of the classroom as the side for the smartest kids in the class. Mrs. Morgan always requested John to sit right side of the class. John was very frustrated, as she knew she was an intelligent student. Later, Rowling admitted that she modeled the character Severus Snape after Mrs. Morgan. However, Rowling had several teachers who did encourage her to write. She had a couple of primary school teachers who, when reading out her work to the class, made John feel very special. They did, and Rowling remembered those teachers until now. She said, "The pride I felt at my work, read out to other students, was a very big deal to me. You never forget the teacher who said to you, 'You can do this.'" John was a very shy child. Classmates remember herself as an unsociable and secretive girl who lives in the world of fantasy and always writes something in her notebook. At the age of 15, her family moved again. Rowling missed her friends, but misfortunes never come alone. Around the same time, John's favorite granny died. Her relationship with her father soured, and her mother became seriously ill. Treatment did not give a positive result, so Anne Rowling's condition was getting worse every year. For the young girl, mother's illness was the biggest shock of her life. After graduating from Wayden School in 1983, Joan Rowling decided to enter Oxford University. She had successfully passed the entrance exams, but wasn't accepted to one of the most prestigious British universities. However, she entered the University of Exeter, located in Exeter, southwest England, the United Kingdom on the Faculty of Philology, where she was intensely studying French. In fact, this idea belonged to her parents, who hoped that their daughter would be able to make a career of bilingual secretary in the future. In 1986, after a year of internships in Paris, Rowling graduated Exeter with a diploma of Bachelor of Arts in French and Classics. After that, John moved to London and changed several jobs. Soon, she worked as a researcher and bilingual secretary for Amnesty International, but she knew it did not fit her. In the summer of 1990, Rowling's boyfriend relocated to Manchester. She spent a flat hunting weekend with him. When returning to London by train, an idea of Harry Potter suddenly came into her mind during that trip. John could not tell why or what triggered it. However, she saw the whole story of the book and the wizard school apparently. The idea about a boy who didn't know he was a wizard until he was invited to the wizard school. On returning home, John immediately sat down at her desk and began to write. The story of Harry Potter saw the world 6 months later after her mother's death. John's mother, Anne Rowling, died on December 30, 1990, at the age of 45. She had visited her 6 days before she passed away, but she couldn't realize the seriousness of her mother's disease. When John visited her mother, she looked terribly exhausted, but no one could even think of approaching tragedy. Rowling can't forget that feeling of heaviness she experienced. The death of her mother sent John into a depression. 9 months after the death of her mother, in an attempt to escape from despair, John decided to leave the country and start a new life in Portugal. She began to teach English as a foreign language. After staying for 18 months in Porto, she met Portuguese television journalist Jorge Arantes, and on October 16, 1992, they got married. Soon, George was called for the training assembly, and he was absent for a few months. While her husband wasn't at home, John wrote the first 3 chapters of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. After returning home, John couldn't find a job, and John had to work almost to the birth of their daughter, Jessica Isabel Rowling Arantes, who was born on July 27, 1993, in Portugal. After a few months after the birth of the daughter, John's husband beat her and drove her out of the house. In December 1993, Rowling and her infant daughter moved to John's sister in Edinburgh. Jan Rowling was the only person in whom John could confide her problems and always rely on her. By the end of 1993, Rowling hit the rock bottom and saw herself as a failure. An exceptional short-lived marriage had collapsed, and she was unemployed, and she was a lone parent living with her daughter, and as poor as it was possible to be in Britain without being homeless. Still, Rowling recalls those years not only as trouble, but also as something valuable because she came back from Portugal with her daughter Jessica. During this period, Rowling was diagnosed with clinical depression and tried suicide. Her illness helped her to invent the characters known as Dementors, dark creatures feeding upon humans' happiness, introduced in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the third novel in the Harry Potter series. A few months later, John decided to rent a small apartment in Edinburgh. Becoming a single mother, almost destitute, she was forced to live on state benefits. John Rowling received £70 per week, which he spent on cheap food and some clothes for Jessica. Rowling was very ashamed of her distressful situation. In order not to stay at home every single day, John went out for a walk with her daughter and wandered through the streets because it was the best way to make Jessica fall asleep. Then sitting with a cup of coffee at Nicholson's Cafe, owned by her brothers-in-law Roger Moore, or at the Elephant House, John continued to work on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Some said that Rowling was writing her book in local cafes to escape from her unheated flat, but later she refuted those gossips. At that time, it seemed that band of misfortunes and poverty would never end. All the problems that had fallen on her head knocked her out of the rut. John could forget about everything, only sitting at the writing desk. However, all those failures helped her to become stronger. Otherwise, Rowling would never know how to succeed. In 1995, after 5 years of writing, John Rowling finally finished Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Since writing the first book, she already knew how the whole story would end. John remade the first chapter of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone for 15 times. From J.K. Rowling biography, we found that she hid her magical world in cardboard boxes under the bed, on the back of the statements about social assistance, in notebooks or just on some sheets of paper. There were lists of all students of the School of Magic with their level of skills and pedigree, as well as experiments with Latin terms and drawing. To facilitate the task for the future illustrators, the writer portrayed not only the main characters but also the magical transformations. And like many other authors, Rowling received a lot of rejection letters. Her book was accepted by Christopher Little, an obscure London literary agent. According to the New Yorker, 12 publishers rejected it. And after being published, the book made a hit, and 300,000 copies were sold in the UK. And the book received a lot of awards. And here comes the film adaptation, which was very successful too. And that's how J.K. Rowling changed her life from a single mom to a billionaire who won a lot of prizes thanks to her book. In brief, J.K. Rowling's life was failure, rejection, and then success.